It's the Papa North Podcast.
And now your host,
Papa North.
Good morning, good evening, for wherever you may be coming from and to wherever you may be going to. We wish you safe journeys, safe passage, and welcome you to the Papa North Podcast. Gender bending, androgynous, transgender ideology. You can't escape it. It's everywhere you look. It's in everything you see, including arts and culture. It's in our politics, even in the products we consume on a daily basis. Heck, it's even in our sports. Think NCAA swimmer Aaliyah Thomas, or the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence show at Dodger Stadium last week. How about Blue Jays pitcher Anthony Bass getting cut from the team after he made comments against the LGBTQ community, and though he issued an apology, was still let go from the team? Garth Brooks? Dylan Mulvaney? Heck, there is even a non-binary transformer. LGBTQ and transgender ideology has certainly infiltrated every single sector of our lives. But I digress. The real question is, when has this ideology pushed too far? Public libraries? Our government buildings? How about in our children's schools? It has even infiltrated sacred institutions like our churches, and you may just have to cross a rainbow-colored crosswalk to get there. We live in a world where people express their preferred pronouns. He, him, she, her, they, them. It's even illegal in some states and provinces across North America not to address an individual by these preferred pronouns. In fact, Carrie Lind of British Columbia, Canada, has been arrested and jailed for opposing his child's gender-affirming care and misgendering his own child. Two separate charges because he chose not to conform to transgender ideology. We have Ontario student Josh Alexander arrested for saying that there are only two genders, and a teacher from Ireland arrested for refusing to use his students' preferred pronouns. Now, before we go any further, I'm sure you know people who have preferred pronouns, and Papa North knows people who has preferred pronouns. And boy, do they get angry when you do not address them correctly. Now everybody likes to get addressed by the way they like to get addressed. But sometimes this can feel a little ridiculous. Perhaps you like Andy over Andrew, or Susan over Sue. I once worked with someone who called me Albert for the full 4 years I worked there. And I assure you, I am no Albert. But instead of taking offense to it, I rolled with it. I had a great relationship with this coworker. We joked around every day, and when it was my time to leave there, he was one of the most gracious people to have spent some time with me. Your right not to participate in compelled speech is not only guaranteed by our constitutions, but your right not to be compelled to say anything that goes against your will is also morally just. I am of the camp that if the first time I met you, you were introduced to me as Bob, then for the rest of my lifetime, you will always be Bob. If at any point you decide to change your name to Sue, you could not expect me to change the way that I have always known you for my entire life, regardless of how that makes you feel inside. That said, if you are clearly a Bob, but are introduced to me as a Sue, respectfully, I will address you as Sue in going forward the rest of my life because I have been introduced to you as Sue, not Bob. I can only imagine some of us who are familiar with the Cleveland Indians or the Washington Redskins may not address those teams with their new handles, the Guardians and the Commanders, not because we are being spiteful, but because this is how we have always known those teams to be. No differently that when I choose not to purchase Bud Light or shop at a Target, it is not because I'm a hateful person. It is because I preferred the product the way it was when I was familiar with purchasing it. However, there are times when my moral compass will come into play while making a purchase, making a decision, or taking a stance on a particular issue. And sometimes those particular stances will come into conflict with how I feel about issues in a legal matter. And that's what's at the heart of today's question: morality versus legality. A question of having your cake and eating it too. At what point do we become hypocrites? And how we square things off when our moral compass is in conflict with the legal system, and how we feel about other issues legally. How we may or may not feel about certain social issues we face. The legality behind those situations, and just how I would want to be treated by our federal government when it comes to those issues I may feel just as passionately about in the question of morality versus legality. The question of a parent's right to provide their child with medical gender-affirming care and how it affects your rights. Actresses Megan Fox and Charlize Theron, actor Will Smith, NBA superstar Dwayne Wade, all have children who are currently in the process of transitioning. We're led to believe that they will want gender-affirming care to transition in their later years. We have seen the push in the school systems and other public institutions, whether it be drag queen storytime happy hour, pride and transgender events, or material given to our children in schools that they are compelled to read in front of their classmates. Mind you, during school board meetings, most parents are silenced when trying to read the material that their children were asked to read to their schoolmates. We have seen both protesters and counter-protesters clash outside of schools. Now it is also the states of America that make up this great union. Now states such as Minnesota, Maryland, Colorado, Michigan, and California are all sanctuary states that will provide gender-affirming care for those who are not the legal age of consent and or a minor. Now, on the other hand, 18 states have banned gender-affirming care for minors. These states include Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Utah. So I think for most patriots and conservatives, we found this to be great news that 18 states have invoked legislation banning or prohibiting gender-affirming care for minors, regardless of how a parent feels or what their wishes are for their child. After all, we only want what's in their children's best interest. But you see, what the problem is, as I was soaking this up as a major win for conservatives and patriots, I found myself watching an episode of Viva and Barnes, and in this particular episode, this was an issue that came up. And when Robert Barnes took a particular stance on this issue, I was compelled to agree. To sum up or paraphrase his argument, regardless of the morality of the question, do we really want the state to get involved and or tell us what we should or should not be doing with our own children when it comes to their health? Who knows best, the state or the parent? Now, Papa North had to do a lot of soul searching and thinking about this stance. And no matter how many times I thought about it, I couldn't help but to agree with Robert Barnes. But before you start asking yourself, Papa North, does this mean that you're turning into a lefty? Does this mean that you're not on our side anymore? Papa North, but what about the children? Some patriot you are, Papa North. But I remember being old enough to remember a time just 3 years ago when our whole world came to a stop. Your child couldn't get on a bus, they couldn't go to the library, they couldn't even go to birthday parties or bowling with their friends. Not without having a mask on or being socially distanced. Not only did these rules apply for your child, but they also applied to you. After a year, we had our first vaccine rollouts. And yes, I am using air quotes for the term vaccine. Pretty soon, your child couldn't go to a movie theater, attend school or church, or join sports and recreation teams without taking the jab. Not only was there a push from the left, fake doctors and fake scientists to have our voices silenced, our opinions unheard, there was practically a movement by some in society to make us second-class citizens, some going as far to say that we should be eradicated. All because that we weren't sure as parents that an experimental vaccine with no trial data may not have the efficacy the vaccine promised, but also not being sure how safe it would be for our children. And when your child is denied access to education, church, or recreational activities because they do not have a vaccine, then these actions become a state mandate. Laws and legislations telling you what you can and cannot do with your own child. Over the years, there have been celebrities pushing back on the amount of vaccines a child needs to take just to attend schools. And there are 17 of them, including hepatitis B, rotavirus, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, Haemophilus influenza, polio, pneumococcus, influenza, measles, mumps, rubella, varicella, hepatitis A, meningococcus, human papillomavirus, herpes zoster, and now included the COVID-19 vaccine. So that's actually 18 vaccines, including the coronavirus vaccine, that your child needs to take just to attend school. Most of the concerns rising from these vaccine mandates include mercury poisoning and the rate of autism rising drastically since these vaccine mandates became policy for school children. Such celebrities pushing back against these vaccine mandates include Rob Schneider. How about Jenna Jameson? Joe Rogan, he's a big one. And 2024 Democratic hopeful RFK Jr. In fact, after having RFK Jr. as a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience, Joe Rogan offered up $100,000 to liberal mouthpiece Dr. Peter Hotez to debate RFK Jr. on the safety and efficacy of vaccines, specifically the COVID vaccine. This is a pool that has reached nearly $1.5 million. And although Dr. Hotez has declined the offer, the point behind me saying this is, as conservatives and libertarians, we are holding these celebrities up high for projecting the way we feel about vaccines, the state's overreach in trying to control what we can and cannot do with our children, all at the same time applauding certain states for denying parents their right to access treatment to transition their child if that's what they feel is best. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. I would think that most of us agree when it comes to our stance on the government. We want them to stay out of our home, stay out of our bedrooms, and they better damn well stay out of our kids' lives. For no matter what side of the argument you are on, there is always a state or province that you can move to, most within a 2-hour drive, that you can go to or you can live in, to either have one of these procedures done to get away from laws that infract on your right as a parent to have this done to your child, or to live in a place where this is the rule of law. For if these issues were not brought up on a ballot for whatever state or province that you live in during your election cycle, then to have the state once again dictate to you as a parent what is acceptable or not for your child, what you can and cannot do medically with your child, then I don't think one can really claim that these laws are the will of the people. Now I get it, and that's just politics. And at the heart of politics, I think the real solution to a lot of these problems are referendums. Yes, they're expensive, yes, they're timely, but at the end of the day, I feel that we could resolve a lot of problems by putting it back to the people. This is why you have to get involved. This is why you have to go to the polls. This is why you have to be mindful of not just the politician that you're voting in, but who those politicians will appoint and who it is that they put their weight behind when it comes time to vote in judges and district attorneys. Here in Canada, we do not vote in our judges or crown attorneys. They are appointed by the party in power. So for us Canadians, be mindful of which party you're voting in and which lawmakers that they're affiliated with. All that said, what say you? Let's check the pulse on the street with a little segment we like to call Patti's Pals. All right, welcome to Patti's Pals. This is a little segment where I like to bring in my best friend and admin podcast, Patti, to help us read some of the comments from our socials so we can get a better understanding about how our fan base is feeling about these topics. So we got podcast Patti on the line, and Patti, how are you doing?
Going good, Papa North. How's it going there?
It's going good, it's going good. So we ready to do this?
I sure am.
All right, what do you got up for us?
Alright, our first comment comes from one of our Facebook members, Stephanie Hill, from Oshawa, Ontario, and she says, in my own personal opinion, and I am part of the LGBTQ plus community, and have friends who are adults and have had NTF gender reassignment surgery, I feel that any child under the age of 16 should not have access to hormone or hormone-blocking medications that would contribute to gender transformation. I feel that this would be a major decision, and a child simply cannot comprehend the complexities of such a definitive decision. Playing around with medications that affect your hormones is risky, let alone doing it before the hormones are fully developed. Last year, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and chemo put me into early menopause, and my hormones are all out of whack, and I'm dealing with the repercussions of that. I would not wish that on any child. Basically, I'm saying a child should wait until they are an adult to make a major decision about their body. There are ways a child can affirm their gender without such drastic measures. Clothing, hairstyles, makeup, things that are less permanent. Now, on the other hand, if my adult child has made the decision and done the research, knows the risks of medications and surgery, has been to the therapist, and is adamant this is what they want, I will support, but not until they are an adult. So what do you say, Papa North?
All right, thanks for your comments, Stephanie. And I don't have children, let alone a transgender or transitioning child. I've read lots of stories, lots of reports where in the later years the regret is there there's loss of sensation, other things begin not to work. So I agree, it has to be a very adult decision that you make in your life, and it's not one that you can make as a child. Like other things in science and medications, right now the proof is not there. Who knows, maybe years down the road the science improves and we could actually make these things happen for people. As far as putting myself in the shoes of a parent looking at their child who wants to do this, I myself will be 100% on the side of you have to wait till you're 18, in the United States 21, when you are legally allowed to vote, and make this decision when your brain has matured. And if that's the decision that you make then, regardless of whether I like it or not, regardless of how I feel on the inside about it, I know the love for one's child is eternal. And if I want to see them happy, I would probably support them at that time. That said, I don't have children nor a child that is in the process of transitioning, so I guess I could be grateful for that. But we appreciate your honesty and candid answer and being interactive here with Team North. All right, Patti, what do we got up next?
Our next one comes from one of our Twitter followers, Jamie Hanna, also known as Jamie Hanna 2, and he chimes in with gender-affirming care, the right to allow young and questioning kids to make permanent decisions on issues that change constantly or are guided by peer pressure does not seem like care. At a time when more kids are coming out, we are hearing less of the stories from those who have made a transition and regret it. The pain they suffer both physically and mentally, or the dark history that gave us this gender confusion. The fact that dissenting voices are banned and demonetized speaks volumes. So what do you have to say on that, Papa North?
All right, thanks, Jamie. And there is a lot of stories that have not come to the surface yet. And although the transgender trend has been around since I was a kid, if we think about Boy George, more recently RuPaul, we certainly weren't doing surgeries then. There just isn't a whole lot of science to say what are the repercussions of getting a surgery like this. With Jamie, I would also have to agree that there is a big chunk of it that is peer pressure. We see it on the TV, in our media we absorb. It is pushed by certain leftist governments. It is pushed by the Biden administration, the Trudeau administration. I'm sure other administrations around the world, the United Nations are pushing it. And that is a lot of pressure to deal with as a youngster while your brain is still maturing. A little food for thought. I looked up the other day, what are the effects of multiple colors and stripes on the human brain? And it does say it can mess with your head, it can make you irrational, it can make you irritable, but it also can make you susceptible. And I don't think for a second that that's not something the government is not aware of. I definitely wouldn't put it past a marketing team of a major corporation to invest time and money into something like that. So agreed, there's a lot of pressure from a lot of different angles, and that's a life-altering decision. So if you don't make the right one, you could be in a lot of trouble for the rest of your life. Thanks, Jamie. Much appreciated. All right, Patti, where are we going to next?
Our next one comes from one of our Twitter followers, Knight Ronin, at Philip H276058846, and his comment reads, "No, parents' rights should be unlimited, but from the libertarian perspective, but that ends the moment your actions does harm unto others. Introduction of puberty blockers and surgical interventions on children is harmful and abusive. The very nature of being a child is that you are not a fully mature or developed individual. Transitioning children robs them the opportunity to properly discover who they are as a person. It is not compassionate, but the ultimate cruelty. At the age of adulthood, be my guest. That was a choice you have a right to make, but it may be one with consequences and even regret. The woman in this video felt she was in the wrong body. After 8 years of transitioning, struggles with the life of a man. What is it to be a man? I have never seen a man talk this way in my nearly 60 years. I feel bad for her. No child should experience such torment and pain. So what do you have to say on that, Papa North?
All right, thanks very much, Night Ronin. Appreciate you staying interactive with us. And I gotta agree that a parent's right is absolute. Definitely, you don't want to be doing harm to another person, and that's once again where we get into the argument of legality versus morality. Is there something indecent, something illegal about what they are doing in providing the opportunity for their child to transition before they are of age to make that up for themselves? Also, a big proponent of you need your life to discover who you are, and there are a lot of different things that are going to happen along your life's journey, and those things will all affect you and help make you the person you become in the long run. And if you are of age to decide for yourself that you want to live in a different body, then by all means go ahead and do that, but wait till you're of a mature enough age. As far as the video you sent, appreciate it very much. Some good old ABL. We'll link it down in the description below for everybody, and we're gonna link down in the description below everybody that commented today as well, because we do appreciate it. All right, thanks, Night Ronin. And what else do we got going on there, Patti?
All right, our last comment of the day comes from another one of our Facebook members, Katrina Lindsay from Oshawa, Ontario, and she says, to be honest, it shouldn't affect anyone else but the parents and kids. All we can do is support them in the decision that they make, because most likely it's in the child's best interest. Even though I do live in Ontario, Canada, I find that the USA is going back in time, like how it was on the show called Pose. Any thoughts on that, Papa North?
All right, thanks for your comment, Katrina, and I'll tell you where I agree, I'll tell you where I disagree. So 100%, this is a decision between the child and the parent, and the medical practitioner to an extent, of course. Whether or not it is in the best interest of the child, that's where I would disagree. That being said, I will die on the hill for your right to make the decision for your child. You are the parent. I don't believe the federal government should be telling you what to do with your child one way or the other. That is your decision as a parent. And again, I will die on that hill for you to have that right. As far as what it's like to visit the States, as someone who bleeds red, white, and blue, and to be honest, hey, podcast Patti, she's from Michigan. I haven't really seen stories like that or heard them. Maybe something sensationalized from the news. I'm not going to deny that there are parts of the States that probably are like that. I could only hope and pray that humanity finds a way to get along, finds a way to come to a resolution to some of these issues that we come up with each other. But again, at the end of the day, that is your right as a parent, and I could never take that away from you. So we thank you very much, Katrina, for contributing today. And let's give a great big thanks to Podcast Patti for doing a great job on our first Patti's Pals.
You're very welcome.
Great job, Patti, and we'll catch you a little later on.
Okay, Papa North, thanks very much.
That was Podcast Patti with Patti's Pals. And again, we'd like to thank our followers for chiming in on today's episode. Don't forget to check out our socials in the descriptions down below so you can join us and be interactive with Team North on the next episode of the Papa North podcast. So to recap, just because your ideology as a conservative or libertarian is in agreement with certain states, provinces, or countries with a parent's consent that are banning gender-affirming care does not necessarily mean it lines up with the ideology of being a conservative or libertarian, where you have the ultimate right to decide what is best and what is not best for your child, free of government interference and or collusion. And to deny any other parent that right would be tantamount to becoming the very liberal ideology that you are fighting against. Our freedom of speech, right to bear arms, and our right to raise our children with our beliefs is absolute and given to us by God. No person, institution, or government should ever tell you otherwise. And before we wrap up today, we'd like to give a big thanks once again to podcast Patti, the Rezonator for the Papa North podcast theme song, RMILabs for the Patti's Pals theme song. All their links can be found in the description below. And to all of you for joining us on the first Papa North podcast. And for wherever you may be coming from and to wherever you may be going to, we wish you safe journeys, safe passage, and from all of us at the Papa North podcast, God bless and good night.